Okay, guys, third time's the charm. So this entire thing was done in 3 different videos, so I apologize for that. So finally, we are again talking about we ended the last slide on Hades and Persephone. This is a fresco that was done on a wall, and the thing that is notable about this is the first time that we've seen anything in a 3/4 view. If you look at both Hades and Persephone, so we have Hades here, we have Persephone here. When you're looking at these two, we're seeing them at 3/4 view, which means they're partially turned, they're not in a full front, and they're also not in a profile view. So it looks like because of this and because of the way the wheel is turned in a 3/4 view as well, it looks like they're coming out of the wall at you. However, sadly enough, due to damage, it's almost completely lost. Here we have the Battle of Isis or Issues. I can't remember how it's pronounced. But what we're seeing here is it's a mosaic, so it's that tessera mosaic, which are tiny stones or pieces of glass that are cut that the Greeks were very famous for. We are seeing shadowing happening. So if you look at the rump of the horse, we're finally seeing cast shadows down here, and we're seeing these shadow shapes is what we call them. So during the Hellenistic period, there's lots of innovations that happen. Cast shadowing, as well as that 3/4 view and extreme emotion that continues to happen with this new canon that came along. Sorry about that. So I want to talk briefly about plays, about Greek plays. A lot of you probably already know about this, but we already talked about how the Greeks were very famous for their drama and plays. So this is an amphitheater. It's a half circle view, and the way it's set up is for voices to be able to project as a performer is performing down in here. Typically, they were very dramatically dressed because everyone up in the back row would have to see it. So this one specifically would seat about 12,000 spectators. The acoustics are amazing. It's still used today. So they would have to use these highly emphasized masks, so then the people in the back row would be able to see what was going on and the emotion that was occurring, as well as their dress and costuming was very dramatic as well. So here, I'm going to see what slide we're on. We're on 76. So what we've got here is there's some columns that have been, so we're seeing up here the Corinthian capital, so the top of a column. During the Hellenistic era, we start to see not just Ionic or Ionian capitals or Doric capitals. We're starting to see this Corinthian capital. So what they're doing is they're trying to solve the problem of being able to see this capital aesthetically pleasing in the round instead of just seeing it from two sides. So the way to make it symmetrical was to create these very organic designs all the way around it. Corinthian capitals, well, all capitals are still used because we have a lot of new revivals. So a lot of classical revivals occurred. If you look at the upper right image here, this is called a thosis or thosos. It's a circular shrine. We're going to talk more about this. This at one point was for a religious healer. And it's in Delphi, Greece. So basically, what would happen at this temple is there was a soothsayer or a young girl that would be possessed by the spirit and would be able to give advice or tell fortunes, what was going to happen in the future. So when we talk about a circular temple, we haven't seen those yet. It's called a thosos or tholos. There's a colonnade around it. This temple specifically is in the Doric order. We're going to continue to see this throughout Roman structures as well. So now we are in the Hellenistic period. Before we were in classical Greece. I apologize if I said that wrong. So what we're seeing in the Hellenistic period is it kind of began with the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BCE, and he was buried in Alexandria, Egypt. The Hellenistic period lasted about 3 centuries. International culture united the Hellenistic period, and the language was Greek. Building activity kind of shifted to Hellenistic monarchs in Asia Minor, so we're seeing the influence of the Hellenistic period occur everywhere. So this is the Temple of Apollo. This was had very theatrical elements of surprises. It kind of breaks down the architectural canon, which was mathematically set at the beginning of the Greek periods. This temple was worked on for about 500 years and was never finished. We have an open sky roof, so there was it was open to the roof, or I'm sorry, open to the sky, so there's absolutely no roof on this. So it was basically a connection between the temple and the heavens. The cella doorway was 5 feet high and could not be entered. It could not be entered, so this is where the Oracle of Apollo was. So we're talking about oracles. We talked about the oracle over here in this circular tholos, or temple, and basically the oracle would would be possessed by the gods or the spirit and would give those predictions. So what we're going to talk about here is city design. We still use Greek city designs today. Most cities are designed in this manner. So the gentleman's name who came up with the city design is Hippodamos. Aristotle singled him out as the father of rational city planning. He designed the city after the Persians had destroyed it during the Greek invasion. So it's a very imposed grid, very strict grid structure. It's very orthogonal. We talked about that word when we discussed Xerxes' palace, right? An orthogonal structure or city structure is a city built in strict grid pattern. Again, we still use these today. The Stoa of Attalus II in Agora, Athens. A stoa is a classical prototype for a roofed colonnade. So if you look at that, the stoa it's got many levels and it's roofed. It's a colonnade. It's not a temple. The stoa of Athos II was the most famous stoa in Athens. It was reconstructed by the American School of Classical Studies, so it was pretty much destroyed. And then they had come in, American School of Classical Studies came in and refinished it. The Doric order is on the ground level and the Ionic order is on the second story. This is typical. We see this a lot where two different orders are used, and what it is as it goes up, it becomes more feminine. Typically, and we'll talk about this with the Colosseum, typically it's because females were in seating arrangements, or in the Colosseum, the males were seated in lower seats and the females were seated up higher. So the mixing of the two orders of the facade becomes increasingly common during the Hellenistic period, and then again is recreated in the Roman Empire. Okay, Hellenistic arts. We went from classical dramatics to incredibly dramatic. These are very, very highly dramatized pieces. So on the left here we have a Gaelic chieftain. The Gauls pretty much inhabited all of Europe, what we would consider Europe at the time. The Gauls were a Gaelic clan, So what I associate them with is Ireland and Scotland, and those being so small now, these people have been around this long, but were kind of forced out of Europe and into their homeland, well, what is now considered their homeland. So what we're seeing on the left is a Gaelic chieftain killing himself after he killed his wife to avoid capture, because what would happen is when the Greeks would capture them, they would have raped and enslaved the wife and would have brutally murdered him. We're still seeing the small genitalia and the very muscular bodies that are associated with that perfect form. On the right here, we're seeing another dying Gaul. We know that he is a Gaul because of his hairstyle, and he has a braided cord around his neck. That was general wear for a Gaelic person at the time. This is a statuary group, so it was a grouping depicting the defeat of the barbarians. Sculptures depicted their so these sculptors, again, that long bushy hair, a very careful study of the Hellenistic sculpture. It's very careful study of the human body. Yeah. Very sad. Okay, the altar of Zeus. Again, this is one of our, this will be one of our artifacts. So we'll talk more in depth about it, but this is the most famous Hellenistic structure ensemble that they have to date. It's a continuous frieze. Obviously, they have disassembled this and reassembled this in a museum. We've got that continuous frieze, excuse me, of that gigantomachy around the bottom. This was made by Lysippon. You walk around and see the wonderful torsos and faces and all these structures that are so beautiful on the underneath. There's an intense suicidal act that are hallmarked in the wait, where am I at? I'm sorry, guys. I missed it. I think I'm on the wrong page here. Okay, well, we're going to just keep going. I'm going to go out of my brain here. So this was symbolic of the Attulos victory over the Gauls in Asia Minor. We've got extreme emotional intensity that we're seeing. So if you see here on the left, we've got the movement, we've got the fabric that's clinging to this figure, this form, and then we have these people who are writhing in pain and are very distressed. We have serpents in the back. Typically, when we see winged gods or winged individuals, it is, especially the female winged individual, is considered the Nike, which is a personification of victory. It's not an actual goddess, but it's this personification of victory. So it's the victory of the Greeks over the Hellenes. Or not the Hellenes, oh my goodness. The Hellenes, or the Greeks' victory over the Gauls. So again, you see that bushy hair and the mustache and the necklace that they wore. Here is my all-time favorite sculpture ever. This is, again, one of our artifacts. This is a water fountain, a drinking fountain, and this is a Nike. So Nike has just landed on the bow of a prow or a bow of a ship. We're missing the right arm, we're missing the head, but the way the fabric forms and clings to her and the dramatics of it, and you can literally see her blowing in the wind. The fact that she's standing on the prow of a ship and we've got the water fountain occurring, you hear that water, and so it's a multi-sensory sculpture. We're seeing this beautiful woman or this beautiful goddess or personification of victory landing on the prow of the ship while somebody's taking a drink, and you can see the wind blowing, as well as hear the water splashing, and it gives a very visual dramatic to it. Venus de Milo and Barberini Faun. The Barberini Faun is probably one of my all-time favorite ones ever. So let's talk about the Venus first. So a while back in the classical age, we talked about how the first female nude would have been Venus or Aphrodite, and how she was doing everyday things. She was taking a bath. It was in a non-sexual nature. However, what we're seeing here is female portraiture turning from non-sexual to more exotic or sensual. This Aphrodite is not as fully nude as the first one. However, the way the garment clings to her hips, the way it clings to her legs and is partially falling off, it gives this very sensual feel. Very much more sensual than Praxiteles' Aphrodite. It suggests the dropping of her draperies. She was holding an apple in the other hand. Obviously, it's not there anymore. Very beautiful, but it talks a lot about sexual desire. We move to the Barberini faun. Same thing. We've got this faun sleeping. He's drank too much wine. He's passed out. He's in an intoxicated dream. He's got that archaic smile occurring. It's that classical awake and alert. A lot of eroticism here. We talk about homosexuality and how it kind of pulls that in. The Hellenistic period focused as much on male eroticism as well as female eroticism. The defeated boxer. Again, the Hellenistic period has my favorite sculptures ever. So the Hellenistic art continued to portray athletes. This is the seated boxer. What we're seeing here is a battered veteran. He's not a young pup. You can see his lines, the age in his body and muscular structure. He's still strong, but we're also seeing the defeat that he took. He's got a broken nose. If you looked closely at this, you would see the scratches and the dripping blood that's coming out and the sweat that's pouring out of his body. They've literally carved sweat into him. This bronze original was one of very few found in Rome. He even has cauliflower ear for you wrestlers. Going even more extreme. So we've got the old market woman and we have Demosthenes. So on the left, let's talk about her first. She's haggard. She's extreme. She might not have looked like this, but they sure did take her features and push them. And then on the right, we have the Demosthenes. This artist portrayed him. This gentleman spoke out against the Macedonian rulers. So basically, spoke out against injustice for treatment of a lot of slaves and people of lesser people. The artist captured his behavior so well. Even his stance and his posture. You can tell that he's intelligent. You can tell that he's wise and old due to his wrinkles in his facial structure. However, his stance is almost humble and subservient. The slave on the, or I'm sorry, the old on the left, the old lady on the left is almost aggressively walking, her body's bent. She's ugly. It's very, very dramatic. Again, I can't stress that more. Okay, Hellenistic art under Roman patronage. So the Romans come in, they take over, basically they absorb the Hellenes into their life. They just my feelings on the Romans are a little mixed. I don't know whether they are a melting pot or a bunch of brutes that come over and just steal, or thieves. Anyway, so under the Roman patronage, we've got a general defeating the Macedonian army, which declared Greece free, but then they became a Roman province in about 146 BCE. The city-states after that never regained their glory. They just kind of died out a little bit. The conflict with the Athenians and the Romans, Athens stayed the center of the culture, but art, but culture and art. Sorry, the center of culture and art, but not in politics. So again, the Romans gave them their freedom, but then kind of had to absorb them or take them back anyway. This is called Laocoon. Now this puppy here was found later in the Renaissance time, and it ended up giving birth to the complete Renaissance era. Once this was found, it was mimicked and redone in many, many different forms and in many different paintings. It was an inspiration for a lot of the Renaissance movement. Basically what this is, the story behind this is there was a priest who warned the Trojans of the Greek horse. So the gods got angry with him because he helped the Trojans, and they sent this huge snake. This Laocoon is devouring all three, the father and the two sons. We've got high drama, again, twisting and curving. There's lots of unrest happening. Your eye never stops. Lots of negative space. And then we see that triangular composition, which becomes so strong and so prevalent. And that is it.